Brace yourself. Can it pass up anytime now? Collect yourself. Does it ever be the same in this sad, sad world? Walk around the light a bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So sit back in your hole.
Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you today. Today we begin the third unit of the course, this course in Arthurian legend, where we actually finally get to Arthurian legend. To do that, I want to lay some... Yes, thank you. Thank you for the wild round of applause there. I want to lay some background information down for you. What's this a map of here? Earth, yeah, map of the world. If you look over here on the Eastern Hemisphere, what you might hear sometimes called the Old World, we know that the two halves of the world here didn't know about each other until fairly recently. In fact, we just marked the anniversary of the knowledge of each otherage of the two halves of the world with Columbus Day that we don't do anymore, but that's with... Florida has split the difference with all the controversies related to Columbus Day. They've split the difference the worst way possible. You still get Columbus Day off. They just don't call it that. But teachers have to go to work, so that's how they've that's how they're doing it. So basically, teachers have been colonized as the no one has suffered as much as people like me have suffered. I think I'm going to move on. Anyway. So if you lived in this half of the world for most of human history, you didn't know about this half of the world, which means you pretty much thought, and my vision is so bad, but you pretty much thought, and if you were in Europe, you knew about Africa, but you didn't have a really good feel for what its shape was. So from your perspective, the end of the world was right here. The furthest you could go was right here. Let's zoom in closer. These two islands, these two large islands, and the little ones that surround them, all right? So the one to the east is the island of Britain, all right? Today home to three nations, the nations of Scotland, England, and Wales. And to the west, the furthest you could go before dropping off the edge of the world, as far as people of the time were considered, was the island of Ireland. Today, there are two nations, or two states, that make up this territory. So you have the United Kingdom of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And then you have the Republic of Ireland taking up most of the island. When you hear terms thrown around about the nationalities of this place, it's easy to get them mixed up. But if you're speaking to the wrong person, the getting it mixed up might be offensive. Not like super offensive. So you wouldn't want to call someone from Scotland or Wales English. You might anyway, but you wouldn't want to. You'll probably be corrected. And you certainly wouldn't want to call someone from Ireland English. But you could call anyone from the island British, because the nations of England, Scotland, Wales, and we don't put it on the map anymore, but Cornwall down here, are all parts of the island of Britain, or Great Britain, which is where we're turning in this unit and for most of the rest of our time, because King Arthur is a British figure. What you're looking at here, the oldest human remains ever found in Britain, and they go back to about 900,000 BC. They're human remains, but they're not us just yet. These aren't Homo sapiens remains. It's an earlier species, Homo antecessor, that we first find in Britain nearly 1 million years ago. Britain is inhabited by Neanderthals for a for more than 200,000 years, but more than 200,000 years ago. And then it's unoccupied because you have a lot of variations in the climate. And there are long stretches of time where the islands of Britain and Ireland are both frozen solid and cannot sustain human population. The first evidence that there are modern humans, when we say modern humans, we don't mean people with iPads and TikTok accounts. By modern humans, we mean us, our species, Homo sapiens. So the oldest evidence of us living in the island of Britain goes back to about 40,000 BC, but that's not a permanent settlement. Those aren't the ancestors of today's British, because 5,000 years later, you've got another 20,000 year long period where the island is uninhabitable and therefore uninhabited. We've got continuous human settlement in Britain, continuous population going back about 11,000 years. So this house here is from about 7,800 BC. So the people who lived in Britain 9,000 BC are the ancestors of the British people today. Although, as you're about to find out, the British population is very diverse because there have been multiple waves of immigration. And not only immigration, but immigration of new peoples who will come to be the dominant people and culturally replace, though not wipe out, the people that came before them. This is the Cheddar Gorge in Britain. And the Cheddar Gorge is where we found the oldest full human skeleton, so we call him Cheddar Man. He lived about 8,000 BC. And Cheddar Man's DNA was so intact that we could, I was part of the team, but we, the people of the earth, have been able to reconstruct many of the features of Cheddar Man. So behold the true face of Cheddar Man, a reconstruction of the actual, not even a sympathy pretend laugh. Thank you, Ma. Team Miles. I am Team Miles today. Angelica's not even paying attention. See my joke? How good my joke is? That's the true face of Cheddar Man. Do I get a birthday cake tomorrow, too? She brought me birthday cakes 2 days in a row. Yeah, what have you brought? Oh, no, I'm Team Miles. You gave me popcorn chicken yesterday, and you brought me food today, too. So, all right, no, we're cool. We're cool. It's this half of the room that I got to have a conversation with. Okay. No, here's an actual reconstruction of what Cheddar Man would have looked like. Some features may surprise you if you close your eyes and think, what do British people look like? Because I'm what British people look like. But what you can see from him is that some of the genetic mutations that led to super light skin, the kind that bursts into flames in the sunlight, which is what most Brits consist of to this day, is a relatively recent, could you get the door for me, please? A relatively recent mutation, that Cheddar Man probably had dark skin, but straight hair and blue eyes. And it was Cheddar Man's people that famously built Stonehenge and the other monolithic structures of ancient Britain. Down here on the southwest, am I getting my directions right? I am, right? Yeah. Southwest, this sort of little, dangling or hanging off of the end of the island there, the one-time nation of Cornwall. Cornwall, which will go on to become the city of Tintagel in Cornwall, is the native home of our main man, King Arthur. And deep into the Stone Age, so yeah, cavemen built this, by the way, built Stonehenge. Caveman's not a technical term, but we are still pre-agricultural at that time. Even in the days of cavemen, Not only were the people of Cornwall skilled miners of tin, that's why the home territory is. Yes, Miles? Miles is asking how Stonehenge was built. We will get an answer to how Stonehenge was built, I think, in the next lesson. You can decide for yourself if the answer we get is the answer, and then you can do your own research if you don't like the answer we get, but we will get an answer for this. The people of Cornwall not only, if you're currently not sitting up, sit up. The people of Cornwall were not only skilled miners of tin, but they built complex international trading networks. This is the remains of an Israelite shipwreck from 1200 BC, 200 years before the time of King David, whose story we told. And within the ship is tin mined in Cornwall in Britain. What's that? Oh, that's where Tinland is. Well, the town, the chief town is called Tintagel, and there's a reason for that. The Cheddarman's people, and the people that built Stonehenge, the people that had been in Britain consistently from 9000 BC on, though, were eventually replaced as the dominant cultural force in Britain by waves of immigrants from the people that we call Celtic. We don't know what the Celts called themselves. And as you look at the image on the screen, so this is the Celtic people at their greatest expansion. And you see that they range from Ireland in the west all the way over to Turkey in the east. And basically everything in between at one point is dominated by Celtic peoples. But what you're not looking at here is an empire. The Celtic peoples were never a single united political force. They were people who shared common ancestry and related but not the same languages. There's very little chance, like if you lived over here in Ireland in 250 BC, you were one of the peoples that we call Celts, and so you would have been related to the Galatians in modern-day Turkey, but you would have had no idea that you were related to the Galatians in modern-day Turkey or to the ancestors of the Spanish or the French or the Belgians, because the spread was over such a long period of time. And today, linguists can figure out that the languages are related, but you wouldn't have been able to understand each other. Nevertheless, Celtic peoples, wherever you find them, have certain cultural traits in common. And somebody doing a second quarter project may wish to consider Celtic mythology as the topic of your project. A very oversimplified version of Celtic religion. They have their own pantheon of gods and goddesses, and the gods and goddesses tend to be forces of nature. The religious communities are presided over by these figures known as druids. Druids combine the role of priest and wizard and poet. So the druid is responsible for the religious rituals, but also for preserving the stories of the people, especially in song. So somebody like Homer in Greece is preserving the stories of the people in song, but he's not also, we have no reason to think he's also performing magic spells or sacrificing goats to Zeus or anything like that. The figure of the druid combines all of these together in one. You'll find that one of the foundational layers of many of the Arthurian stories is older Celtic mythology. So somebody who wants to research Celtic mythology in greater depth, especially if they wish to preside over a symposium, will be doing us all a great service. When the Celts move in, they are a very warlike people. But when the Celts move in and conquer, Human sacrifice is a prominent feature of their religious traditions, by the way. They're sacrificing goats, sure, but that's like, that's like for Tuesday nights. Come Sunday morning, I don't know what their real holy day was, but the prime sacrifice, when things really count, they're strapping some folks down to the altar. Yes. Okay. When the Celts invade any of these places, their home territory is probably somewhere here in far Eastern Europe or even into Central Asia. When they invade, especially Britain and Ireland, and conquer, you can expect that there's going to be a lot of bloodshed. All right? You can expect that there's going to be a lot of conquest or a lot of conflict. But this is not a genocide. They don't go in and wipe out like Cheddarman's people, the Stone Age British people. They've genetically found that Cheddarman's descendants, some of his ancestors still lived in the area. Cheddarman's descendants still live in the area within a 20 or 30 mile radius. So they're not wiping out these people. They're killing as many as they need to get what they want, but what they just want is chunks of land to farm. All right? And once they've got what they want, they're not eradicating the people, but they become the dominant cultural force, and their languages become the dominant languages, and their religious traditions become the dominant religions. So the Cheddarman's people survive, but Cheddarman's culture really doesn't. It's culturally swallowed up by the Celts. You might think a similar pattern is, there are hundreds of languages native to this continent, native to North America. Many of them have already died off. Others are dying, and a few are still thriving. And while there was genocide in this continent, it wasn't total. You have plenty of living people in thriving communities who are the descendants of people who spoke Native American languages, but their languages are just forgotten. Same thing is going to happen in Britain and Ireland. Whereas the Celtic peoples and the Celtic languages, some of them are still alive, mostly as second languages, but Gaelic, the native language of Ireland, is still spoken. There are still native speakers of the Irish language, as well as Welsh of Wales. The Emperor of Rome, Claudius Caesar, invades Britain in 43 AD. There are some decades of conflict, and by the year 87, the Roman province of Britannia is established. The Romans move in, and it's different than when the Celts take over. All right. The Romans move in, but it's not mass migration of like Italian dudes. You're going to see some of that. Of course, you're going to see plenty of Roman officials, although Roman officials who might come from all over the Roman world. So the Roman officials who move in there might just as well be Syrian as they are Italian. But mostly what the Romans are doing are taking over. Right? But they're not replacing the population. They are, however, Romanizing the population. The Celts they were a civilized people. They had settled villages and farming, but they were very much a tribal people with many little tribal kingdoms with little mini kings and one high king of Britain who is not an emperor of Britain, who's much more similar to like the way, if you read the Iliad, Agamemnon is over the Greeks. The Romans take over, and everywhere they go, they Romanize. They impose, sometimes for good, sometimes for ill, usually a combination. They impose Roman structures and Roman customs, which is going to include the building of Roman schools and the paving of Roman roads and the establishment of Roman military discipline, to where eventually, for a time, the Britons thrive so much under Roman leadership that they think of themselves as Roman. To be a Brit is to be a Roman. The Romanness, Romanitas, they would say, becomes part of what it is to be British. This is Hadrian's Wall, built under the orders of the Emperor Hadrian, and it is the northernmost boundary. It's up here, the northernmost boundary of the Roman Empire. So north of this is what today we call Scotland. Confusingly, the Scots come from Ireland. The natives of Scotland are the Picts, and the Scots come from Ireland. It's all a big confusing mess. But the Romans never conquered Scotland. They never conquered Ireland. So this is the northernmost extent of the Roman Empire in Britain and of the Roman Empire. The Emperor St. Constantine the Great, when he got the news that he was emperor, he was stationed with his men in York in Britain. He becomes emperor in the year 306. Anyone remember why Constantine is famous? Don't say because he was emperor of Rome and emperors of Rome are all famous. What is he especially famous for? What about the church, Tyler?
Didn't he make the church, like allow it? The monotheistic church, like Christianity?
Yes, he legalized Christianity. Before the time of Constantine, Christianity was an illegal underground sect, often persecuted. Christians were fed to lions and all that. Unpleasantness came to an end with his edict after he became emperor because his mother was a Christian. The majority of urban, so city-dwelling British people profess, so they convert to Christianity, many of them probably sincerely, others of them probably not sincerely, but the majority of city-dwelling urban Brits profess Christianity by the 360s. When this happens, you've got a couple dynamics going on. And these dynamics, even though the literature we're reading is much later than this, it is preserving stories that go back to this time. Going back to a time of spiritual transition in the kingdom, where in the kingdoms of Britain, where out in the country, many people are still worshiping the old gods, following the Druids, sacrificing folks. In the cities, the big fancy folk are now worshiping this new God and following Christ. And you're going to have a lot of people in the middle who are trying to straddle both worlds. And the result is producing a literature it's very much, Arthurian literature is very much Christian literature. However, you will see underneath it, you will see like the lava, somewhere underneath our feet there's lava, right? That's how the earth works, right? You're like, no matter where you are, you go down. If I go straight down, eventually I'm gonna hit lava, right? Yeah, and just like that, just like that geology lesson I just gave you that might cost you my teaching certificate. Hey, put away whatever you're doing, please. Just like the lava under my feet, if you go far enough beneath the surface in the Arthurian stories, you're going to find older spiritual views of the world. You're going to find pagan lava flowing underneath the Christian soil of Arthur. In the year 380, the Emperor Theodosius I makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire by this time is divided into two halves. It got too big for any one dude, one emperor with one butt on one throne to control, so they split it in half. Like, we're still one empire, but we got a western half with a western emperor ruling out of Rome, an eastern half with an eastern emperor ruling out of Constantinople. This eastern half is going to thrive for a long time, and it's going to stand for another 1,000 years. Eastern Empire doesn't fall until 1453. But the Western Empire is already in decline at this point. It will fall in 476 AD. By the year 401, the Emperor Honorius, you can see him's just a little dude, the Emperor Honorius says, you know what? We got too much trouble at home on the continent in Europe. I can't afford to support Britain anymore. And he calls all the Roman troops out of Britain. And he says to the Brits, you're on your own. All right. This is the major historical turning point that's going to lead to everything we read about in the Arthurian stories, is when the Romans say, screw you guys, we're going home. We can't help you out anymore. If you look at this map here of Britain around the year 400, so right at this point where the Romans are going to pull out, okay? So what you see here is the areas that are white on the map, the dominant population, the areas that are white and green, because we're not going to get so specific as the map. The areas that are white and this color green are the dominant population is native Britons, and that would be people of Celtic background mixed with Cheddarman's people. The blue areas, the population is still predominantly Celtic, but those are areas where Rome had imported Germanic soldiers known as Angles. If that sounds a little familiar, it's because they brought with them the earlier version of the language we're speaking right now. The blue area is where Rome had invited in to help them out mercenaries from Germanic people known as Saxons. And this other greeny kind of area is territory where the Romans had invited in Germanic people known as Utes. So as the Romans are backing out, they've left behind these little strongholds of non-British people, of Germanic people, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. And what's going to happen is that the Germanic peoples are going to want a lot more. Right? They're going to say, we want this territory to be ours now. And Rome has been saying, no, you can't do that. You know, we invited you here to help us, and we gave you some farms. Enjoy your some farms. That's all you get. But what did the Romans just do? Romans just left. Said, Brits, you're on your own to protect yourself. And so the Saxons and the Angles and the Jutes start feeling like, you know, I might want to do a little rape, pillage, and plunder and take over some of this territory. A note on the word England. Some of the Arthurian literature will use the word England. That's an anachronism that Arthur himself would be turning over in his grave. Because England, the land of the Angles are one of these savage, barbarian, Germanic tribes that the Britons of the time are resisting. All right, so Arthur would hate the term England, but you're going to hear him use it nevertheless. All right, so it's in this moment, the 400s, the Angles, the Saxons, especially in our literature, we're going to hear about the Saxons, and the Utes are now trying to expand and conquer more and more territory that belongs to the Celtic Britons. All right, and just like when the Celts did it 1,000 years earlier, there's going to be a lot of brutality, a lot of conflict. There's not going to be wholesale genocide. The goal is not to eliminate the people. The goal is to keep eliminating the people till they give us what we want, which is more and more land, more and more power. It's in this moment that Arthur, the historical Arthur, who we'll say more about how much is actually historically true at the end of the course, because you can't really have that conversation without a million spoilers, kind of like we did with the Iliad in classical studies. But it's in this moment that the historical Arthur is said to arise, the 5th century. And who he is he is a culturally Roman, ethnically Celtic Briton who is leading a resistance against the Saxon, Angle, Jute barbarians and their attempt to conquer. He lives in the 400s, perhaps straddling the 400s into the 500s, which just so happens to be 400s, 500s, 600s, 700s, the darkest of the Dark Ages. We have tons more material that's 1,000 years older than we have from that period. All right. So there is nothing about Arthur that has come to us in writing from Arthur's lifetime. The oldest reference that we have to Arthur is from the 600s. We quoted it on the first day of class, and it doesn't tell any story because it mentions him in passing. It's this Welsh poem, and at one point the poem is praising a warrior named Gwarder, which kind of rhymes with Arthur. And so the poem's like, Gwarder's, super duper badass, but he was no Arthur. The poet obviously expects us to know who Arthur is. So he doesn't tell us anything about Arthur. There's another poem from a little later that mentions the fact that the burial site of Arthur is a mystery, but doesn't tell us any story. The first time we get any details is from a historian from the 800s by the name of Nennius. And here's what Nennius tells us. Then Arthur fought against them, this is the Saxons. Then Arthur fought against them in those days, together with the kings of the British, but he was their Duke of War. The first battle was at the mouth of the river called Lane. The second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth were on another river called the Douglas, which is in the country of Lindsey. The sixth battle was on the river called Bassus. The seventh battle was in the Celidon forest, that is, the battle of Celidon Cade. The eighth battle was in Gwinion Fort, and in it Arthur carried the image of the Holy Mary, the everlasting Virgin, on his shield, and the heathen were put to flight on that day. And there was a great slaughter upon them through the power of our Lord Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Virgin Mary, his mother. The ninth battle was fought in the city of the Legion. The 10th battle was fought on the bank of the river Trifwoid. The 11th battle was on the hill called Ogned. The 12th battle was on Baden Hill, and in it 960 men fell in one day from a single charge of Arthur's, and no one laid them low save he alone. And he was victorious in all his campaigns. So here's the first time we get any meat on the bones of Arthur. First time we get any historical detail, and it's already, apparently, it's already steeped in legend. Unless you want to believe that this man Arthur did completely by himself kill 960 Saxons in a single day. It means by the time we get any story at all, but this is, by the way, this is all the story we get from Nennius. We get details, but not details like who is this guy actually and what happens next or anything. We get a paragraph. But by the time we get those details, in that paragraph, he's killing 960 people all by himself. Arthur becomes such a legendary figure because he is clearly successful in holding back the Saxons. And my interpretation is he is such a legendary figure because he's the last person who could do it. Once he's out of the way, the tide has turned. By 660 AD, most of the island is ruled by Germanic peoples. The native Celts are pushed north to what today is Scotland and west and southwest to Wales and Cornwall. The Anglo-Saxons have completely taken over, and nearly completely taken over by 100 years, 150 years after the time of Arthur. This map shows what the island looks like, 942. It's even less native Celt and more Germanic, although now by the 900s, you've got the Vikings in the mix too. The Vikings take over large portions of the territory. In 1066, somebody who's descendant from the Vikings, somebody who comes from Normandy. Normandy is a region of France, but it's ruled by Normans, Norsemen. William, the Duke of Normandy, and I think the anniversary is just a couple days ago. I think it was October 12th or 13th, 1066 in the Battle of Hastings. William of Normandy becomes William the Conqueror, otherwise known as King William I of England. And now this territory, which is a mix of Celts, Germanic, Angles and Saxons and Utes, and Danes and other Norsemen, other Vikings, is now ruled by French, who are themselves descendant from Vikings. And it's his that's the order of the day to this day. King Charles III of the United Kingdom is the descendant of William the Conqueror. It's in this environment, this new regime. We'll almost finish for the day. By the way, no, we're not going to end up doing any reading today. But I will finish this setup and we'll start reading fresh tomorrow. It's in this environment, this new regime, this once again foreign colonizing power is calling the shots, that this figure arises. He's Geoffrey Arthur of Monmouth. He was the bishop of the town of St. Asaph in Wales. He is a Celtic Brit, born in 1095, and is the author of this phenomenal and phenomenally influential work, The History of the Kings of Britain. It's originally written in Latin. He is the first existing author to actually give us a narrative about these things and about Arthur himself. And everything that comes after this work builds on it and uses the story that he tells as the frame on which to hang. You can think of this book as the beginning of the golden age of Arthurian literature, and Le Morte d'Arthur from just before the turn of 1500 as the apex of Arthurian literature. But what this book is essentially a fleshing out of what Geoffrey of Monmouth does. At the beginning, Geoffrey of Monmouth says, "What I'm writing is not mine. It's just a translation of an ancient text that I just discovered, and I got a buddy who will back me up." He's just making that up. It's almost certainly not true that he's translating an ancient text. He uses a combination of sources. Some medieval sources that we still have, other written medieval sources that are lost, many stories that have passed on through orature, because by his time he's living 600 years after the time of Arthur, and a healthy helping of his own imagination. It's a constant perplexing challenge to scholars to try to figure out what's what. Because there are beloved elements of the Arthur story that we hear for the first time in Geoffrey of Monmouth. And it kind of matters if you love the story, if you want to know, well, did this part really happen? Was this guy real? Was that lady real? Were these dragons real? Whether it's one of the things that Geoffrey of Monmouth made up, or is it something that grew out of orature, or does he actually have a source? Stay in school, grow up, become super duper smart Arthurian scholars and solve that for me, and I'll go back in time and give you 10 points extra credit. So it's to Geoffrey of Monmouth that we will first be turning in our reading, although we will launch that reading at the beginning of tomorrow's class. That's all I need from you I know this is sort of a lengthy introduction, but it's sort of the background info you need for everything we're going to do for the rest of the class. So hopefully, do you forgive me, Maria Camilla, for talking so long?
No.
Maria Camilla does not forgive me. Does that mean I only get half a cake tomorrow? Yeah, half a cake tomorrow. I'm sorry, I'm the worst teacher ever. That's all I need from you for today. Rest time's yours.
Walk around a lot a bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million bits and pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So sit back in your hole, or get back in your cave. If I'm going down, I'm taking someone with me.